Death, destruction, despair, fear, terror, and of course, war. These words can summarize chaos and what it is. It is hard to imagine for so many millennia the horrors of chaos have terrorized the galaxy, manipulating its inhabitants. It was because of the destructive forces of chaos that the Imperium of Man, the largest and most powerful nation in the galaxy, was nearly destroyed. But what is chaos really? Most often the word means its influence, the chaos gods, their followers, and of course the warp itself. Chaos is synonymous with the warp. They are inseparable. Chaos is an endless ocean of spiritual, emotional energy that fills the warp, and this ocean is a great untainted force of change and power. It is physically and spiritually corrupting. Even so, the most gifted psychers can harness this energy. It gives them the ability to transcend the material laws of our universe. Such power comes at a price. The malevolent influence of chaos can twist a psyker over time, corrupting his soul and mind. To better understand the essence of chaos, let us turn to the history of its origin. And we begin, of course, with the warp. Warp is a psychic dimension parallel to our world, which is also called immaterium. In other words, there is materium, our dimension, and there is immaterium, the warp space. There is no exact data when exactly warp appeared, but many agree that warp has existed as long as our galaxy. Hard to believe, but it was once a very different place from what it is now in the 41st millennium. It was a relatively peaceful place with no warp entities or dark gods as such. But time passed, civilizations were born and died. Their strong emotions, especially such as anger, hatred, envy and fear, were reflected in the warp. They filled it and took shape. These changes affected not only the filling of the warp, but also its condition. Simply put, the warp became chaotic and unpredictable as the emotions of the various races filled it. Over time, the emotions of sentient beings became embodied in demons. The dark gods Khorne, Nurgle and Tzeentch were the final act. They are the embodiment of the emotions of thousands of civilizations that the warp has distorted and distorted to the point of absurdity. The dark gods are the most powerful beings in the immaterium, so powerful that they can manipulate the warp itself, tweaking its currents to suit themselves. The last fourth-born god of chaos was Slaanesh. As a result of the sinful fall of trillions of Aeldari, their emotions gave birth to a new dark god. Slaanesh's awakening was so powerful that with his first breath, with a scream, he almost completely destroyed that civilization and created the most powerful rift between materium and immaterium, the Eye of Terror. And so chaos was born. The pernicious forces born in the warp are undoubtedly powerful, but being shaped by one kind of emotion, they are completely consumed by it alone. Their power and very existence depends on the emotions of mortal beings. Chaos gods are able to allocate some of their power in order to create various demons. They reflect the character and abilities of the creator god. Even though chaos has already been divided into 4 gods, each of them is still so mentally huge that they have no physical embodiment. They remain beings solely of the warp, which does not prevent each from having a vast number of servants and slaves among demons and material races, especially humans. In general, the rise of chaos and its first 3 gods, as legends say, is linked to the development of humanity. It is people, according to many, are primarily responsible for the violation of the harmony of the warp, because there is no escape from the darkness in human hearts. The 4 gods are constantly in competition with each other. Their struggle is reflected in the form of battles between their followers in our material world. Victory in such battles increases the power of a god. However, the victory itself is not necessary. The important thing is simply that the action itself is done for its own sake. At the same time, however, in the warp itself, the gods are engaged in a constant struggle among themselves, for each of them realizes the power that comes with ruling over the immaterium. Their struggle, which they also call the Great Game, will go on forever. It is clear that none of the gods intends to share such absolute power. As previously stated, the warp was not always the horrible place it was known to be at the time of the 41st millennium. The first chaos god to awaken in the warp was Khorne, and he was born out of the emotions that accompany many battles: rage, uncontrollable anger, will, fortitude, hatred, and destruction. Rumour has it that both martial prowess and honour are also aspects that Khorne values. He is the oldest and most powerful of all the Chaos gods. The first blobs of energy representing Khorne entered the Warp during the Old One's war with the Necrons, but it was not until the active wars of Terra's Bronze Age that he was finally awakened. Khorne grew stronger with every act of violence, whether it was done by his followers or not. The name Khorne itself is derived from the dark language word Karneth, meaning Lord of Blood or Lord of Rage. Khorne despises any weakness. Accordingly, he considers the weak unworthy of his rage and therefore does not approve of killing them. However, the actions of his followers completely refute this theory. Khorne despises magic and those who use it. Because of this, he hates Tzeentch. Even so, his main enemy is Slaanesh, whose aspects are completely opposite to Khorne. He considers him a weakling with no warrior honour or pride. All of Khorne's followers are warriors in spirit as well as in body. He never requires his followers to build temples or other such things of no use to him. He is glorified right on the battlefield, because the entire Khorne cult is built on the blood spilled in honourable battle, both of the enemy's blood and one's own. It is said that if any of his followers go a single day without killing, the Lord will definitely be displeased. The next god of chaos held after Khorne is Tzeentch. Tzeentch represents the thirst for change and change. He is known by 1,000 names. The most common ones are Changer of Ways, the Lord of Change, the Lord of Sorcery, the Lord of Entropy, the Great Conspirator, the Weaver of Destinies, and the Architect of Fate. He emerged from the desire for change that lives in the hearts of almost every mortal life form. He is intimately involved with magic, sorcery, with various mutations, and with the most intricate and devious plans. History, destinies, intrigue, and conspiracies, his main interest. He is aware of the dreams, hopes, and plans of all things, and uses this to his advantage, altering and twisting the threads of fate, and constructing his unimaginably intricate plans. Like other Chaos Lords, Tzeentch has a strong interest in humans. No race in the galaxy is as volatile and ambitious as the human race. A spark of hope can ignite a fire that will change a country, an entire world, or even grow into a raging flame that promises to change the fate of the galaxy itself. This is exactly what fuels Tzeentch. He is the greatest mage in all of Warp, and the magic of his realm is inherently about changing anything at will. His followers are sorcerers. To others, he himself is able to bestow powerful powers. In addition to magic, Tzeentch is also attracted to all sorts of intrigue and conspiracies. He is aware of all the affairs going on in the galaxy, and knows what is to come as a result of mortal intrigue. Tzeentch can comprehend the future, foreseeing all possible probabilities. His aspirations and intentions are unknown. His schemes are incredibly complex, and his plans go so far that only he himself knows when and where they will lead. It is believed that Tzeentch is attempting to expand his holdings in the Warp, but it is just as likely that he may simply be altering the fate of a single mortal. Such is his nature. Tzeentch's opposite, and therefore main rival, is Nurgle, who represents despair, hopelessness, and calm acceptance of the future. Naturally, Tzeentch, whose existence is built on a thirst for change, hates this entity. The third of the Chaos Gods to awaken in the Warp is Nurgle. He appeared in the second millennium during the Middle Ages of Terra, when great plagues swept the world, heralding his birth. Of the four gods, it is Nurgle who takes an active part in the suffering of mortals. He commands the diseases and is called the Plague Lord, the Plague God, the Lord of Pestilence, the Fly Lord. It is not uncommon for mortals infected with his diseases to begin worshipping Nurgle for healing. Nurgle is described as a huge creature with a body bloated with disease, with necrotic skin covered in impurities. Nurgle is also sometimes referred to as the Lord of All. After all, everything in the world, regardless of its strength, will someday begin to age and decay. The Nurgle's source of life is their fear of imminent death and disease, and their subconscious response to that fear. The force of life, the driving force behind humanity and other races. Nurgle, like all other Chaos Gods, has his followers among mortals throughout the galaxy. Nurgle himself, as well as his demons, despite his terrifying appearance, are quite friendly and sociable. His demonic servants and mortal followers gladly welcome the pestilences he causes, accepting the plagues as his gifts and the cries of his victims as thanks. He treats his followers in a fatherly manner. They in turn call him Grandfather Nurgle, Father Nurgle, or Plague Father. His Lord of the Flies Church is always open to all those who have realized the inevitability of death and the entropy of the universe. There they become followers of Grandfather Nurgle. The next Chaos God is the youngest of all the other dark gods, yet he is not much inferior in power to the others. He was also the main reason why the Eldari race was almost completely exterminated. Of course, we are talking about Slaanesh. She is the god of lust, debauchery, excess, perfectionism, and hedonism. Slaanesh originated from a scream that formed a warp rift in one part of the galaxy called the Eye of Terror. Slaanesh is capable of taking any form, but is most often represented in a two-part image, a left female and right male with golden hair and 2 pairs of horns. However, it is capable of taking an attractive humanoid form or even being hermaphrodite. Eye of Terror is the result of the Slaanesh awakening in the warp. In addition to the Eldari themselves, their gods were destroyed, with the exception of Cain, who was shattered into many shards, the laughing god Sigarak, who hides in a spider web, and Isha, who, according to the lore of one of the artificial worlds, was captured by the chaos god Nurgle. The symbol of Slaanesh is a conjoined symbol of male and female, but her followers rarely flaunt the symbol. Instead they wear jewellery of an erotic nature. The main enemy of Slaanesh, Khorne, as their ideals are completely opposite. As previously stated, the baneful power of chaos has had a constant influence on the mortal worlds throughout its existence. Every deity in the warp, from the most powerful to the most common demon, have their followers among the mortal races. During the 31st millennium, the Emperor's most trusted son, named Horus Lupercal, fell under the influence of chaos on Davin. In addition to Horus and his underlings, 8 more of his Primarch's brothers and their legions fell under the influence of the Warp gods. Thus began the greatest civil war in the history of Imperium, which put an end to all the Crusades. The Emperor himself was badly wounded in a battle with Horus. At this point, Chaos added 9 legions of Astartes to the ranks. This made up the main backbone of Chaos's military force in Materium. We will touch on some of the units that are in the service of each of the 4 dark gods, and we'll start with the Khornat Berserkers. Some of the first to succumb to the destructive forces and follow Horus were the 12th Legion of War Dogs, led by their Primarch Angron. Following Primarch's example, the Astartes began to worship the blood god Khorne, glorifying him with violence and slaughter. Even before the heresy, the would-be World Eaters had established themselves as some of the most effective melee warriors. Their rage and gratuitous aggression played into the Emperor's hands. It made the War Dogs excellent fighters, capable of doing their lord's bidding. And such animalistic rage was not ignored by the dark powers of the Immaterium. After the Emperor was betrayed in the ranks of the 12th Legion, special units began to appear, who fully dedicated their lives to the god of blood, skulls, and the lord of battles. They were nicknamed Khornate Berserkers, monstrous and ruthless melee warriors. They literally cannot see their existence without battles, assassinations, and a sea of blood in the name of their deity. In addition to the Eaters of Worlds, other legions of Astartes have joined the ranks of the Berserkers, but the former War Dogs have managed to not only fill the ranks of the Berserkers, but also give them a far more monstrous aura. Blood to the blood god, skulls for the throne of skulls. That was their new motto. The Astartes had become part of a brotherhood so savage and bloodthirsty that they were capable of attacking their allies and even each other at the slightest occasion. Skulls dangled from their belts and shoulders and from their chains, along with strips of skin covered in caked blood. Khornate Berserkers are brutal and ruthless fighters. They prefer melee weapons exclusively, the axe being their mainstay, as it is the Khorne's favourite means of killing, but no Berserker has ever given up swords and chainsaws. Their zeal to please their blood god knows no bounds. They enjoy their bloody work, and even though they are wounded, they will fight to the last, trying to sacrifice as much blood as possible to their bloody god. Skulls for his throne of skulls. But a mortal's propensity for aggression alone is not enough to become a berserkers. All these ferocious souls undergo psychosurgery to turn into bloodthirsty warriors who can't control their anger. They become the perfect candidates for the Kornat berserkers. A decades-long siege or titanic battle involving millions of people is like food and drink to them. In such circumstances, entire berserkers' battle groups will gather to participate in the carnage, after which they assemble huge pyramids of skulls from defeated enemies and perform bloody rituals to glorify the Khorne. Those we will discuss next favour conventional physical strength over the destructive power of the warp. They weave the fate of the galaxy through macabre rituals and forbidden agreements, and we will be talking, of course, about sorcerers. The line between psychic power and unbridled sorcery is quite thin. The Order of Adeptus Astartes deny it, but whenever a librarian uses his psychic power, he risks poisoning his soul. Even the most cautious psyker in the heat of battle can accidentally overstep his bounds and cause a massacre. Except that instead of being horrified, he will take forbidden pleasure, which is the first step on the road to limitless evil. After that, Psyker begins to hear ominous whispers of limitless power and might, and visions of immortality will come in dreams. Those who succumb to this sweet call will eventually become a witchfinder, a being capable of controlling the destructive energy of the dark gods. The first blacksmiths were spawned by the 15th Legion of Thousand Suns. Through their thirst for knowledge and unique Psyker abilities, all legionnaires, led by their Primarch Magnus the Red, surrendered themselves to the power of the god of magic, Tzeentch. They rightfully hold the title of the most powerful witch doctors in the world. Inside Eye of Terror, the former legionnaires, led by their demonic Primarch, are constantly improving their abilities and gaining new knowledge. Azek Ahriman is considered to be the most powerful sorcerer, the former and only chief librarian of the Thousand Suns Legion, lord of the diviners and mystic warriors of the Corvid cult. He was also a skillful fighter and a determined field commander, hardened by nearly 2 centuries of warfare. In battle, Ahriman often played a key role in his legion, predicting enemy actions and devising complex strategies to pave the way to victory. Even when confusion and chaos reigned around him, even before the heresy, Ahriman possessed a deep mind and an exceptional talent for controlling warp energy. All of this allowed him to achieve great success and rise to prominence during the darkest days of his legion. When Primarch was able to reunite with the Thousand Suns, Ahriman became Magnus the Red's best apprentice and assistant. After his defeat in heresy and exile in Eye of Terror, Ahriman remains the most powerful mage and sorcerer. He is second only to his Primarch and Tzeentch himself in his knowledge of sorcery. Unlike other witch doctors, Azek does not consider himself a devoted follower of chaos, much less a servant of Tzeentch. Instead, he dreams of becoming a god himself. It is unclear whether Azek himself realizes that such aspirations only bring him more under the influence of the Architect of Fate, for the nature of this dark god is made up of the hopes and ambitions of any mortal being. But even after becoming the champion of Tzeentch, Azek Ahriman can't stop dreaming of rebuilding his homeworld with the Legion and undoing all the evil he brought to the galaxy. The next Lord of Immaterium, Nurgle, also has his own forces sworn to him during the heresy. They were the Astartes of the 14th Legion of the Death Guard. They were trapped in their spaceships during a warp flight when a deadly plague struck their fleet. Mortarion and his legion, in order to preserve their lives, put themselves completely at the mercy of the Lord of Decay. Though their bodies swelled and bloated from the monstrous diseases, they no longer felt fear or agony, and even ceased to fear death. Since then, many of them have dedicated themselves to the service of Nurgle. However, those eager to join the ranks of the illustrious Death Guard must swear allegiance to Mortarion. But the Plague Space Marines' appearance is deceptive. Though they look like crumbling lumps of rotting flesh, they are dangerous foes in combat. Their brain-affected decay has made them immune to weakness in their bodies or the pain of battle wounds. The Plague Space Marines prefer to fire at close range in combat so that they can see their enemies' festering wounds as best they can. In melee attacks, they use blades soaked in rot and hundreds of diseases. In addition to their standard weapons, they also create toxic grenades from severed enemy heads, filling them to the brim with a mixture of all manner of diseases and sealing them with ancient wax. As a result, such grenades become terrifying weapons that are almost impossible to hide from. The first Noise Space Marines, Slaanesh, emerged from the 3rd Legion of Astartes, Children of the Emperor. During the same heresy, they, led by their Primarch Fulgrim, surrendered themselves to the god of lust and pleasure. Even before the Horus Rebellion, the Emperor had granted special privileges to the 3rd Legion. Looking at the honours and hearing the praise for the 3rd Legion, few doubted that its soldiers embodied the ideal Astartes in the Emperor's mind. Noble in deed and appearance, outstanding in all things, mighty, enlightened, purposeful and loyal, and from these heights treachery has brought down the Emperor's children, turning them into the most vile and horrible creatures, driven by pride and consumed by unnatural desires. Coupled with all this, the troopers succumbed to the temptation of forbidden pleasures denied them in their monastic life. Power, wealth, accolades, all made the once illustrious children of the Emperor ideal candidates to serve the Prince of Pleasure. Noise Space Marines, dedicated to Slaanesh, received mutations characteristic of this god. Their hearing became 1,000 times stronger than a normal human's and was able to pick up the most imperceptible differences in pitch and volume of sound. All of this was to ensure that the Noise Space Marine's mind was built solely around these sounds. Sounds that elicit excessive emotional reactions. They make other sensations, such as pain or fear, seem faded and worthless. The louder and more disharmonious the sound, the more pleasure the fallen Astartes get. They set off a chain reaction of addiction, and soon only the rumble of battle and the increasing screams of fear of their enemies can fully excite the Noise Space Marine. In such a state, their mind completely shuts down, after which they become a vessel for a hurricane of sensations caused by the music of the apocalypse. Noise Space Marines are clad in distorted power armor, painted in a variety of screaming and mottled colors. Their senses are so oversaturated that they perceive only the most extravagant colors and patterns. The Noise Troopers' weapons amplify a continuous mental cacophony. Slaanesh screams and prayers that can make internal organs burst and bones break. Psychers are especially vulnerable to trooper attacks, for their senses are voiced and suppressed by a continuous mental barrage. They roar songs of hate and destruction that can make the bravest heart tremble with fear. Other Noise Space Marines use weapons that emit harmonics that cut their victims to pieces, but the most powerful weapons concentrate a special note that rises to an explosive crescendo, using a devastating harmonic that explodes at a given point with a deafening impact. Even heavy equipment can be destroyed by such an atonal attack, as armor plates literally shatter and crew members explode like fruit crushed under the troopers' boots. Before I continue to introduce you to the Dark God's army, it's worth mentioning Chaos Undivided. The followers of Chaos Undivided, unlike other certain fallen legions, honor Chaos itself in the form of all 4 Chaos gods as a single pantheon, worshipped equally in all its manifestations as a single force. Some seek to harness the power of chaos for their own purposes. This is a rather risky path, and it has only 2 outcomes: achieving demonic status or ultimate damnation, becoming a spawn of chaos, and having your soul consumed by the destructive force. Chaos cultists are considered the most ardent and widespread devotees of indivisibility, living like cockroaches among the trillions of people across the galaxy. Cities of hives miles high are choking on overpopulation. Populous apartment complexes sprawl across entire continents, and industrial worlds are relentlessly stamped and produced by the efforts of countless workers under the watchful gaze of their ruthless overlords. The Imperium's great restrictions and decimal regime provide fertile ground for various uprisings and rebellions. They are like a keg of gunpowder that cultists are ready to happily set on fire at any opportunity. In one form or another, they can be found almost anywhere in Imperium. Cultists try to hide their true nature and do not stand out unnecessarily. This is why they are hard to distinguish from the average person. But their clothes hide their tattooed and symbolized flesh. At the sight of these symbols, the eyes of those who believe in the Emperor begin to ache. After the forces of chaos begin a full-scale invasion of the planet, the cultists are not left behind. These cockroaches crawl out of the most inconspicuous crevices and, clad in makeshift armor, pick up the weapons they've kept hidden for so long. After that, they prepare to overthrow Imperium. Few factions unite under demagogues, preaching with success where the daily lives of Imperium citizens are so hopeless that the mere hint of a new order can intoxicate them. Despite the primitiveness of the weaponry, which consists mostly of knee-high assembled machine guns and industrialized flamethrowers, better armed enemies, the cultists literally drown with their numbers. Unexpectedness, numbers, and spontaneous appearance make the cultists dangerous enemies, both for a single planet and for the entire Imperium. The following followers of Chaos Undivided are not as numerous as the cultists. However, they are the most dedicated servants of the Dark Gods. Their strength is the Word. They carry it between the ranks of the Warp Legions, the Dark Apostles of the Chaos Army, which we will discuss next. Even before the Horus Rebellion, a Nicaea court was convened in the Imperium, at which the Emperor issued a decree on the creation of chaplains in the ranks of the Astartes legions. From then on, each legion, and later the Order, had in its ranks loyal followers of the Emperor, keeping an eye on the fighting spirit and morale of the brethren. However, after the betrayal of the criminal legions that followed Horus in many of the renegade ranks, this role remained but was transformed in the most perverse way. Thus were born the Dark Apostles, a vile parody of the Emperor's servants, the Dark Four praising them with their blasphemous speeches. Each Dark Apostle is an important figure in the plans of the Chaos Gods. Their whole raison d'etre is to praise their masters and convert the uninitiated. With their sweet promises of power and power under the warp, the Apostles can seduce entire cities and regiments of Astra Militarum. And their most hated adversaries are the Imperial Church of the God Emperor. In desecrating the holy places of the Ecclesiarch, the Dark Apostles see the greatest offerings to chaos. On the battlefield, the Apostle is a horrific sight, a huge figure of space marines in blasphemous armor, slowly pacing the battlefield without stopping to shout heretical prayers. Their entire body is often covered with the same tattoos praying to the gods of chaos, and their armor is covered with many scrolls with the same prayers and dark symbols. Even their weapons are a mockery of the Emperor's servants. They call their powerful power sticks and staffs the Dark Crozius, and around the Apostle there are always crowds of slaves and cultists as loyal as possible, echoing his sermons and protecting him with their miserable bodies. Rarely does a Dark Apostle choose to serve any one god, so most of them are Chaos Undivided slaves. The Apostles are not the best warriors, nor are they skilled in sorcery, but even among the forces of chaos they wield powerful authority. Countless agent networks of cultists inhabit countless Imperium planets. They are just waiting for their lord to order them to take action. One word from an Apostle is enough for a planet to instantly erupt in civil war, for victory, in which monstrously hideous altars are built on which the cultists who have just brought them victory are sacrificed en masse in the name of chaos. The greatest number of Dark Apostles are in the ranks of the Legion of the Word-Bearers, which is not surprising because its Primarch Lorgar is the main preacher of chaos in the galaxy, and therefore the other legions and gangs of traitors are trying to lure at least one Apostle to them by any means. After all, this gives them not only the blessing of the gods, but also a huge crowd of followers and dark priests ready to rush at the enemy at the first signal. Even instances have been known of the Dark Apostles' dark word, perverting even the most devoted sons of the Emperor. Lorgar was the first Primarch whose heart turned away from the light of his father, but he did not do so solely of his own free will. Erebus, one of the most powerful captains and the first chaplain of the Legion of the Bearing Word, had long been a slave to pernicious forces. When the Emperor punished Lorgar for worshipping him as a god, Primarch was shocked, and it was Erebus who suggested to him that since the Emperor was not worthy of Lorgar's worship, there were other more ancient forces that were worthy of it. The veil fell from his eyes, and the true power and essence of the warp was revealed to him. The fallen Primarch was eager to share his discovery with the entire galaxy, but Erebus advised him to be careful on his way and then pointed out his next target. It was the warrior Horus himself. The initial phase of his plan was successful. Erebus faked the warrior's injury, after which Horus was taken to the Serpent Priests on Davin. He set in motion a chain of events that led to the largest war in the Imperium, a war that drowned the entire Imperium in blood. In these and 1,000 other dark intrigues, Erebus was both puppeteer and puppet, an instrument of the destruction of everything the Emperor fought for, and one of the pawns of the warp forces. But the most famous follower of Chaos Indivisible was the Black Legion, led by its current commander Ezekiel Abaddon. The former 16th Legion had several names. They were originally the Moon Wolves, but it was after Horus was promoted to warrior that the Legion took the name Sons of Horus, in honor of their Primarch. However, after their defeat on Terra, the Legion, ashamed of their name, was renamed the Black Legion, and their new commander was the already mentioned Abaddon the Despoiler. Now the once illustrious warriors act as a multitude of disparate small gangs and factions throughout the galaxy. They unite only at the call of Abaddon to participate in another Black Crusade. However, it's not so much the Legion itself that deserves attention, but their leader. Ezekiel Abaddon was the greatest hero, a mighty warrior who fought to expand and strengthen the Imperium of humanity. And back in the days of the Crusade, he was the first captain of a legion of moonwolves who fought on thousands of planets, freeing them from Xenos or by force, forcing humans back into the Imperium fold. Abaddon was always on the front lines, and his hatred for the Xenos was as strong as his love and respect for his Primarch. He honored Horus as god, while Horus himself accepted Abaddon as his favorite son. There is an opinion that Abaddon was the son of Horus, although it would be more accurate to say his clone. In the same opinion, Abaddon is the product of the Emperor's earliest experiments in recreating the Primarch, at a time when they were scattered by chaos throughout the galaxy. After the Emperor himself renamed the Moonwolves to Sons of Horus, the would-be destroyer rejoiced most, feeling proud of his Primarch. Because of this, after the heresy began, he followed his god without any hesitation, and after Horus died, he vowed to avenge his named father on the entire Imperium. He is now a Chaos warrior, an informal leader who unites all Chaos Space Marines and other destructive forces for the Black Crusades. Their goal is to overthrow the entire Imperium of man and the power of Terra. And while we can only wonder whether he will achieve his goal, or like a pawn in the hands of the warp gods, will find death on the battlefield.